Hey everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
Oh, Rush Nation, Murf here. How's it all going? It's Tuesday, best day of the week for Stocks and I. No Stocks today. Stocks is dealing with a bit of a family issue that he's just dealing with. So unfortunately, that just means it's not just me, as always. There is always someone that we bring in. But it's been fantastic week so far. We launched our FFCC competition on Thursday. 256 person best ball knockout tournament, single elimination, 5 drafts completed, which is about 22% of them. Thank you to everybody who has donated. We've raised over $3,000 for all sorts of various charities. If you haven't donated yet, please just get online, donate £10, $10, €10, whatever it is, wherever you are in the world, and just give a little something. Just to follow the commentary, or if you're in the drafts to do that. They're all for great causes. Pick the cause that means the most to you, and share the donation with the hashtag FFCC. But to everyone who's in that, thank you so much for doing that, and I hope you're all enjoying the content online. But it's enough about that and more about today's guest. Returning guest, he is the man who knows next-gen stats better than most, if not all people that I know, at least. Part of DirecTV's Fantasy Zone, part of Prime Video's content as well. But he's also just launched his brand new podcast, which I absolutely love, the Fantasy 5 podcast. Welcome back, James Koh, to 5 Yard Rush. How are you?
I'm doing great, guys. I appreciate you guys bringing me back on, and it's always great to talk to the fans across the pond.
Yeah, well, it's great to have you. It's just always blessing whenever we get time to talk and talk about I can see your Emmy in the background. I just got a bit starstruck by that. If we didn't put in the bio, you've won a few of those as well, so that just caught my attention. But yeah, what's been going on with you? Obviously, we talked a little bit beforehand. We're in a COVID situation, but what's been going on since we spoke in the last sort of 15, 16 months since we last had you on the show?
Has it really been that long? That's crazy, man. But no, it's been far too long. I need to get back on the show more often. But no, it's been good. We've just been trying to get by. It's just a different world nowadays, right? So I've got my daughter in the back. She's in the other room doing a little online piano lessons. We're just trying to figure out how to give her like math workbooks and reading, comprehension workbooks and stuff. And it's like I was telling you, just the whole, keeping them occupied without giving them, just loads and loads of TV is tough, So being a parent, being an educator, it's those things take priority. And a lot of times, I just feel so far behind this year in regards to prep, and I'm talking about NFL prep, it's like I just got done with depth charts probably, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago. And that's something that I would have done, 2 months ago under normal circumstances. So just my workflow has been extremely interrupted. And but you know what, man, I consider myself lucky, blessed, because everyone I know in my inner circle is healthy, and we've got jobs, and we're making it work, man. So I just feel blessed regardless, and I hope everyone else out there is doing well.
Yeah, I think it's an awesome message, and I completely agree. It's such a difficult world out there now, but we're kind of settled into this isolation bubble. I was speaking to some friends over the weekend. We had our showpiece sort of soccer cup final, which my team won on Saturday, and it was bittersweet for me because amazing that we won it. We were the underdogs. It wasn't expected. It was a great feeling to watch it and to be part of it. At the same token, I would have been there. I haven't missed a final in years. And it's kind of that hit. I think it's the first time, missing the league games was like, okay, this is bad, but it's fine. I can make do with that. It was the cup final. Was like, I genuinely feel like I miss live sports now. Like I feel like it's it's pulling me in. We've got no NFL this year coming over here, which is a shame. But
Yeah.
I think it. At the end of the day, it's kind of one of those things. I feel bad for moaning because people have got it a lot worse than you and I. But on the same token, you're allowed to miss certain things, right? But
100%.
but you've, what have you been picking up? I know you've been so busy, but have you picked up any hobbies? Have you developed a new skill? I know people that have learned languages or have been doing courses. I don't know. You've been up to anything? Picked up a new hobby or?
Yeah, the one hobby I've picked up certainly is I've picked up a lot of baking. So it's actually really funny. My love for baking actually. I've always loved eating baked goods. That's never been the issue, but actually going through the process of baking, a lot of it stems from GBBO over there when I started watching Great British Bake Off and just all the amazing things that these guys were able to create. So that kind of inspired me to kind of get in the kitchen and do it. And again, what the hell else am I going to be doing nowadays? So I've been baking a lot of different cakes and cookies and brownies and stuff. So no, it's been good.
That's awesome. Yeah, we do love the GGBO over here, and it's an English tradition, and we always try and get. I went to school in America, and I got a lot of friends over there, and try and get them into watching it, and we always have this thing whenever we go and see friends or family over in America that we always do something very British, whether it's an afternoon tea with some cakes or we do
There
an
you go.
English roast dinner. But the problem is, and I learned this the hard way. There's a store which I know for English folks, for American folks, Wagmans. We went there, and that store is expensive. I think we made stuff to get a meal, and it was like $50 to do a meal at home. I was like, this is nuts. It's just so
Yeah.
expensive. But anyway, on top of all the other things that you doing and occupying yourself and baking, you also launched a new podcast in the last couple of weeks. So tell us all a little bit about that, because I've been tuning in. I listened to the one that dropped today about Aaron Rodgers. It's phenomenal. And
well, thank you very much. The big thing for me is that I haven't been on a podcast for 2 years now, and it's been a while. So a lot of folks, maybe listening to this podcast, maybe remember me from the NFL Fantasy Live podcast when those glory days when we were, breaking out shows and having a great time, and it was myself, Marcus Grant, Matt Harmon, franchise, Alex Gelhar, and we were just having a grand old time. And I know that all of us, the shows were good, and we were having a great time, and I think a lot of people resonated with it. That resonated with a lot of people, and we picked up a lot of fans just because we were having a lot of fun talking in front of microphones, right? And that's something that I've missed, we did that show for, oh gosh, I was doing that show for, that podcast for 4 years, and so to kind of be away for 2 years it's been tough, man. Like I really love the podcast format. It's so much more wide open, and you can kind of take it any direction you want. You don't need to worry about, commercial breaks and those kind of things. But no, it's been good to be back. The Fantasy Five, it's a concept that I've had actually for a long time. I was trying to push it when I was over at NFL Network. I've been pushing with a few different folks. I got some preliminary talks with radio.com and things like that, but it's a 5-minute podcast, and it's something I'm calling a micropod. It's a micro podcast series, just 5 minutes. And for me, the reason I believe in it is because I know there's a lot of folks like myself out there. I've got 2 kids. I've got last year I literally had 7 different jobs. Okay, my tax return was insane. I had 7 different jobs, and I've got 2 kids. Trying to be a good husband, good father, all those things. I love podcasts. I don't have time for a lot of podcasts, right? So that being said, I kind of want to develop a micropod series where you get 5 minutes, and I just try to cram it in with as much fantasy information as possible, as necessary too, right? So just talking about moves, the fantasy fallout of such moves, and those type of things. But it's 5 minutes long. I promise you, man, if you give it a try, and I really hope people just give it a try. It's 5 minutes. That's all it is. Give it a try. I promise you, it's very informative. It's pretty entertaining. You get in, you get out, you get the information you need, and you move along your day.
100%. I couldn't vouch for it more, especially as we're in a world where we're all at home, and I subscribe to a lot of podcasts. I've had to really cut back because I used to commute for 3 hours a day, so listening to podcasts was easy. I don't do that anymore. My commute is 30 seconds upstairs, and I don't get the breaks I used to. I'm not able to sit around and listen to podcasts. I got a near 1 year old at home. I got a wife. There's chores to do. You're always at home, so you can't get away from doing anything. And I just find that I am struggling to catch up with everything. So I think not only is it a great and informative pod, but I think the micropod is a really good concept, especially in this world. Like it couldn't be better timed because like you say, you get what you need to get out. There's the preamble, the introduction. I know we're doing one now. It's nice, and it's kind of how our format goes. But I think when it gets to the crunch, you're coming up to your drafts, you're coming up to the season. What you need is those waiver hits, 5 minutes in and out. You're at your start sits, ad drops, whatever it is. 5 minutes. Thanks very much. See you later. I can do this. I can action it. And every time you do your pod, and you've done, I think, 3, right, of the series now, there's always something that leaves me thinking. And I look at a lot of projections and do my own projections, do my own rankings, and you always make me go back and look at something. So I mean, I'm not high on Aaron Rodgers this year by any stretch, but I listened to your podcast today, and all of a sudden I'm looking and thinking at his touchdown totals and thinking, and spoiler alert, you talk about Aaron Rodgers and his touchdown totals today. I'm thinking maybe I'm just even a little higher than I should be, and I have him like 16 on my board for QBs, so I don't have him overly high. But I'm thinking that actually maybe he's, one of the points you make, I'm not going to spoil it, makes a lot of sense. You think, okay, actually, I need to think this. So yeah, it's a great pod.
You mentioned Aaron Rodgers. He's a guy, and we'll get into it when you talk about players that I'm lower on, players that I'm higher on, but Aaron Rodgers, and again, it kills me to say it because I love Aaron Rodgers. I think obviously first ballot Hall of Famer, one of the in my mind one of the 5 best quarterbacks of all time. But just I don't think the offense has done him any favors. I'm not a big Matt LaFleur fan. I think Matt LaFleur is not a good coach. I've got there's tons of advanced metrics that would suggest that as well. But just overall, you mentioned him as a quarterback 16. I think that's about right. But right now, I think he's being drafted as like the quarterback 8.
Yeah.
Maybe the quarterback 6, which to me, I don't see him returning, top 10 quarterback value. So that's a big reason why I would have him lower. And look, if you are a veteran of the fantasy space, you know that once you get past the top 5 quarterbacks, you're pretty much waiting, right? So if you're projecting Aaron Rodgers to be the quarterback 12 to 16, what are you even doing taking him in the first 10 rounds? You know what I mean? You could just wait 13th, 14th round and basically find, the exact same production, but you're getting it, 4, 5, 6 rounds later. So I agree with you. I think quarterback 16 sounds about right. I wouldn't put him any lower than that. But if he's down there in that range, as a veteran, seasoned fantasy player, that there's no reason to take a quarterback in the first 12 picks if you've got him that low.
Absolutely. And, there are so many players that you can evaluate differently. We'll get into that when we talk about some players. But that's what I mean is you gave a piece of insight and people think like, 5 minutes, what can you get out of 5 minutes? It's right. Every podcast, you get me thinking about something. You think, right, okay, I'm going to go look at this. And that's why it's great. So everybody, please go. We'll put a link to the pod in the show notes. Definitely go check it out. As James says, it's 5 minutes. If you don't, then you're the one missing out, not him or us. So
yeah.
But let's talk about what's going on about COVID, and we get a lot of questions. We get a lot of people talking to us about strategy and what to do. And we're obviously in the middle or towards the end now of these opt outs. We've had some players opt out for very serious health reasons, and others opting out because they've got family that they've got health issues, or they just don't want to be part of this. And completely understandable. And I'm glad that none of these players are getting judged for wanting or for choosing not to play. But in terms of, it's a difficult question because I don't think there's a specific answer. But in terms of these opt outs, what are your thoughts for the 2020 season? What can fans expect now? One, over the next couple of days, on do we expect there going to be more names opting out? And two, in terms of just fantasy in total, like, because the potential knock-on effects of these opt-outs and slightly different depth charts, and the different way that the teams might operate, especially with people like Doug Peterson who have got the virus and have to be at home. Like, what can we kind of expect? I appreciate it's quite a tough question.
Yeah. Look, the thing for me right now is, and the players have until Thursday to either stay in or opt out of the season. So that time is coming, just in a couple of days here. So we'll have some clarity in terms of the opt outs. But with the way the game is played, and there will be travel in the NFL season, there's just no way around it. Guys are going to get sick. Guys are going to get it. It's an impossibility to me that it wouldn't happen. Hopefully by, we're hoping by at some point during the season, maybe there will be more clarity, more answers on the medical front, but that's not this podcast. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's something else, man. But the way I'm approaching it, I honestly just kind of approach it as another injury. And it's obviously football is, and fantasy football, we talk about the injuries a lot. And to me, this is just another thing that folks will get. Injuries will occur. Of course, it's not happening on the field. Well, I guess you could make an argument that it is happening on the field, but the bottom line is, I think you need to start adding some, injury spots onto rosters. If you wanted to add an extra bench spot for depth, yeah, the waiver wires will be thin this year. Look, the bottom line is this to me: there are going to be a lot of unknown commodities doing things. There's going to be street free agents because guys are going to get sick, and they're going to go and find rando dudes off the street to play football. Practice squad guys are going to be getting called up. Waiver wire guys are going to get claimed. So it's going to be interesting because there's going to be so much volatility in terms of random guys scoring touchdowns or random guys producing. But to me, I think that's just part of fantasy football. That's just part of football. At least that's what I'm trying to tell myself. And we just try to move forward in that way. So I just, from a day to day, like how we're dealing with it, I don't think there's a lot of change necessary, other than you do need to add, I think, as a commissioner, a couple of spots for injuries.
Yeah, I agree with that. So we got, as a standard for all of our listener leagues, book leagues, people who bought our book, people who listen to the podcast and we open them up, we host most of these leagues on Sleeper. Sleeper actually have COVID designations for IR. So the good thing is you can't even have people try and exploit it by, you could have settings such as out for IR, but that could be someone who's just, not playing, could be a healthy scratch, could be a slight injury scratch. They have to be on the COVID-19 approved list. Dynasty leagues, they've put a nice option for people that opt out. So you could stash them on the IR for the year and then pick somebody else up. So they Sleep would be really good as an app for a fantasy app to adopt this. And, we've put 4, 5, 6 spots in, depending on the type of league it is. And then we'll just see how we go with that. But it's interesting because we were stuck with this decision. We started our charity tournament at the start on Thursday. We're in a couple of other drafts that decided to postpone until all the opt-outs were done. But we decided, obviously, with 256 people, it's a bit much to try and move that. So the rule that we came up with during the draft, which is going on now, that if a fantasy player drafts a player who opts out, when it's their turn to pick next on the clock, they'll be able to take that player that they selected, whether it was round 1, round 7, whatever round it was, and be able to swap that out for someone who's available on the board. So you're still getting a bit of a penalty in the sense of,
Right.
if a round 1 player opts out, which we probably don't expect, and you're in round 9, you're having to get a player who's 8 rounds below the board, but that person is still going to be better than waiting till the end of the draft and enacting the waiver wire, or because this is best ball, you wouldn't have a chance to replace him. You just have to use a player
Yeah, right.
that you draft
Right.
later on. So that's
Yeah.
how we kind of got creative with that opt out, and actually the move was very well received. We've luckily not had to use it, which is good, and we'll see what happens in the coming days. But have you got any other suggestions other than some extra spots where people are worried about drafting and want to just postpone till the very last minute, but it's actually then probably not great for people to do that, for timings and sort of trying to cram a draft? Or what's some other ways that people could potentially, for commissioners, get creative with COVID to make it an equal and fair league other than just adding some spots?
I just, and it's such a tough question because honestly, it's such an unprecedented thing. I just don't think fantasy is built right now to really deal with it. It's almost like, and I know this is not a great answer, but you just got to change your philosophy and your mindset. You know what I mean? You kind of have to just roll with it and know that this is going to be a weird and wacky year, and kind of just know that it's going to be extremely volatile. I mean, like I said, there's going to be street free agents. You know what that means? There are guys that are not in the game. Not in the game. There's going to be guys that you could not even pick up that are going to produce in fantasy this year. So how do you work around that from a product standpoint? I don't know how you do it. So it's just it's very tough, man. It is just so tough. The game is just, when we're talking about fantasy, is just not equipped to deal with something like this, where there will be, in my opinion, a good number of guys who are currently not in the league producing, stats, and they'll just have to figure it out from there. So it's going to be tough.
Yeah, it's almost going to be like a 10x of what we see every year. Like 2018,
Yeah.
it was the year of CJ Anderson, and 2019, it was guys like Greg Ward and Boston Scott, who, were nobodies, and then all of a sudden come along and become relevant. And I think you're right, but I think it kicks in a bit earlier in the season. So in terms of some strategy for drafts, because the one thing I'm seeing is people aren't afraid to take backup quarterbacks in big formats, in larger drafts, 20, 22, 24 man plus drafts. People aren't afraid to take, I in my best ball draft, I took Chad Henne as backup to my Patrick Mahomes, because it's a position you need to ensure. And it's like, well, I've got 21 other guys. I'd rather pick Chad Henne, who, if he has to play for whatever reason, he's going to protect my position at quarterback. All right, he's no Patrick Mahomes, but rather that than take a flyer on a Greg Ward in the 22nd round, who might or might not produce. Like, Chad Henne might do nothing all season, but if he has to come in, I've shored up the position. And that's one way that I'm trying to think about getting creative. But are there some ways in which players need to address their drafts and perhaps break from the norm and draft and invest in positions they wouldn't normally as much?
I think you're smart in doing that with Chad Henne, especially in best ball, because you got no pickups, right? I think in standard redraft leagues, I think Henne could still stay on the waiver wire. You can, kind of wait and see if something, we're hoping obviously nothing happens to any of the star players, but if something does, certainly we'll make those moves at that time. You talk about somebody like Henne in that Andy Reid offense, and that is such a smart move, because I don't care who you are, Andy Reid's going to coach you up. You know what I mean? He's going to put the best scheme in front of you for you to succeed. So to me, I think that's a very, very smart move. I think I think even in redraft, you kind of sort of, hinted at it, and I think you hit it right on the head, which is, to me, you have to draft two quarterbacks. Even in standard redraft, if there are guys that you really like, man, I think drafting two quarterbacks in this particular year is absolutely necessary because, as you mentioned, we're hoping nobody gets sick, but if they do, what are we really looking at in terms of the waiver wire? That's going to be tough. So I think I think if you're even in you don't need to be in some monster 24-man league, but even if you're in a 12-man league, if you have, a borderline starter, I probably, am thinking about, if you got like a Cam Newton who you're not even sure is going to start the season, if you've got Cam Newton, you want to back that up, so just kind of hedging your bets a little bit. I think that's a smart move and something that I will certainly be employing in my drafts as well.
Yeah, I just think in this scenario, especially super flex leagues, I think you're so much better off taking, if you're playing in a 22 deep roster, I don't think taking 4 QBs is a big deal. I even think if you could stretch to 5, just because that position in a super flex is so volatile, that
Right.
if you have a couple of guys, you've already got Matt Stafford and Gardner Minshew, if they don't make the season, that's 2 starters gone. Where are you going to go? I think you've got to have the depth of the position because, one, you'll get a positional advantage over your opponents because you'll have the cover they potentially won't. And two, you just know that you'll always play 2 quarterbacks every week because you'll always have the guy, which is, I guess, what you need to do. And do you know what? If it's not looking likely that these guys are getting sick and the rates are going down, which is great for everything, drop the guy for someone else week 1, week 2.
Sure.
It's not a big deal. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting way. I don't know how you approach wide receivers. Yeah, still a lot to work out, but it's definitely interesting. The ADPs since these opt-outs have gone absolutely nuts because there's guys that just their ADPs absolutely tanked through the COVID news, and there's some that are really starting to prosper. But moving to that then, in terms of assuming we get a season, which I'm pretty confident we will in some form and capacity, we've already talked about Aaron Rodgers, but let's talk about some players who you are personally higher on than consensus, and players you think are going to massively outperform their ADPs as they stand right now. So have you got a couple in sort of each position that you want to highlight and why?
Well, I just have a couple total, and one of them I talked about on the podcast today, but I think Carlos Hyde is certainly a player that is being wildly underdrafted right now per next gen stats, right? Well, first of all, let me just say the price, right? So like Carlos Hyde is going right now somewhere in, outside the top 150, which is, to me, a bit of a surprise. Rashad Penny's going to start the season on the top. He tore his, ACL in week 14, so very late into the season. I would just be stunned if he played anytime in the first 6 weeks. So I think he'll start on the pup. I think he's going to miss the first 6 weeks as per the rules. And then we'll see, just because, he takes 9 months off doesn't mean that he will be ready to go. So Carlos Hyde, to me, is a fantastic player, by the way. I think he's a great scheme fit for what Seattle wants to get done. Again, per next gen stats, Seattle running backs, among all running backs, right? Seattle ran the ball between the tackles. So we're talking about design, power run plays, just design plays that go between the tackles. They ran it the third most in the NFL. And also per next gen stats. Meanwhile, Carlos Hyde was one of the most productive inside runners in the NFL. I love the guy last year for Houston. They ran a lot of shotgun power that went, right between the tackles, and I thought Carlos Hyde looked fantastic. As a matter of fact, I had him rated as the 6th best inside runner last year. And per next gen stats, he actually compiled the 2nd most yards between the tackles, second only to Christian McCaffrey, to kind of give you an idea of how productive he really was in between the tackles. So I just think he's a great scheme fit for what Seattle wants to get done. And you're taking a guy, outside of the top 150. So this is somebody you're getting, 12th, 13th, 14th round. He's going undrafted in a lot of spots. So for me, he's somebody that I absolutely would be targeting. And again, I could, if he adapts well and picks up that playbook, man, he's going to vastly outperform ADP because I just don't see Seattle going with a one-back set. I don't see Chris Carson, and I love Chris Carson. You can go back. I mean, I've written, love poems about Chris Carson. I love the kid. He's a Mack truck down there, man. He's great. That being said, they're not going to give him the ball, 30 times a game. It's just not going to happen. We've moved on from that NFL. Okay. So, and especially in Seattle, we've seen it. It's going to be, once they got past Marshawn Lynch's prime, it's a two-back rotation. Okay. And that's what we're going to see. So, to me, I think Carlos Hyde is going to get a lot of burn. I could see him getting, anywhere between 12 to 15 touches a game. And you're getting him in the 12th round, sign me up. Sign me up all day long. He's a good player, guys. He is a good player, and this is a great scheme fit for him. I do think that he will outperform ADP, especially in the first 6 weeks of the season.
I think that's a great bet. I think there's two guys there in that range that I think are huge bets to massively outpunt their ADP. One, as you're mentioning, Carlos Hyde, because I think from the get-go, I think he's a great person that will get going. I think the other one is Keyshawn Vaughn, because I don't think he's going to do much in the very beginning, and people are worried about this backfield. But you look at Arians' comments and what he says in the combine. He wants pass catchers and pass protectors, and Keyshawn Vaughn will do both. That guy's not getting off the field. It's just not going to. I mean, it's going to take a while, especially with COVID. Shady's there. There's going to be a bit of a transition. Rojo is nothing to worry about. I think those two, if you can snag them both, if you're late in the draft, you're towards that 12, 13 turn, I think you could snag both and really do something with both of them towards the season, trade them off later on if you've got plenty of depth, or get yourself the pieces, or just have them for the playoffs. You're going to be in great shape.
Keyshawn Vaughn's an interesting one to me because I like him as a player. I'm not like a big, scouting dude, but the scouting reports that I've certainly read on Keyshawn Vaughn is that maybe he might struggle a bit in pass pro. That's an area where I think LaShawn McCoy is actually very good. I'm a little bit concerned with Vaughn's role in that regard. He's, like I said, he's a very interesting one because you would think that all the signs indicate that Vaughn should be that guy. I agree with you. I don't think Rojo's the answer. But once they added LaShawn McCoy, I get it gets a little bit dicey for me. I think that LaShawn might cut into his overall, passing down work, and I still think Rojo is got the slight advantage in the early down work. Man, it's tough to say. And again, I go back to kind of Bruce Arians too, because Arians is the guy that likes veterans, So I almost wonder, especially early on in the season, will he try to give LaShawn McCoy every opportunity to kind of claim that job, because he really has tended to lean towards his veterans and really kind of away from younger players. So that's something to keep an eye on. And Keyshawn Vaughn, I think, is a good player, certainly a third-round pick, and obviously Tampa's high on him. But it's a crowded room back there with Ronald Jones, Vaughn, and now LaShawn McCoy.
Yeah, it is. I think at the beginning it's going to be definitely Rojo and Shady's job, because Vaughn's not going to be there. I like that late round gap. If I'm looking at guys in that range other than Hyde, and you're looking at the guys you can get there, you might get Anthony McFarland and you're betting on an injury to Connor. Okay, I get that. Everything else around there, you're just picking guys. Like, you're just kind of hoping that something is going to happen. And if I had to pick a guy in that range that I think has the potential to get a job towards the end of the season, the playoffs, and really eat into share, Vaughn's probably my pick of everyone down there. But yeah, it's a tough situation. I've kind of been fading that backfield a lot, and I've been picking up some shares of Vaughn 14th round because, hey, it's the 14th round, right? You either hit or you miss. If you go home, it doesn't matter. I like to have guys on my roster who are very easy cut decisions for my waivers. So
I hear you.
It's never a big problem. But who else are you thinking is going to massively outpunt their ADP? So you've got Carlos Hyde. Is there another name you can share with us?
Yeah, I love Anthony Miller this year in Chicago. I think he is the stench of 2019 Chicago Bears. I think has driven the price tag down for almost all of their assets. We're talking about Allen Robinson, David Montgomery. All these guys are going, I think, a round or two or three lower than they probably should, just given their overall share in the offense and volume and all of those things. But Anthony Miller, to me, is just about as surefire a pick as you can make. To me, he's a slot receiver. As a matter of fact, I'll go back to next gen stats again. Anthony Miller saw 90% of his targets last year from the slot. So I get that when you kind of look at him, he's kind of this bigger body dude, and you're thinking, oh, he might be able to play outside. Maybe that's the case, but the Bears don't see him that way. The Bears certainly see him as a slot receiver, and that's where he got almost all of his looks. For me, the big addition is the addition of offensive coordinator Bill Lazor. And I just think he could unlock Anthony Miller this year, who, again, is entering that third year as a wide receiver, which, remember, is traditionally been a period of growth for a lot of receivers out there. But Bill Lazor, when he was the OC with the Bengals, and he had everyone healthy in Cincinnati for the first 8 games of the season. So we're talking about a healthy Andy Dalton, healthy A.J. Green, healthy Tyler Boyd, healthy Joe Mixon, Gio Bernard. So he had a full complement of players. Andy Dalton threw into the slot 40% of the time, and Tyler Boyd went crazy in that stretch, okay? We know Tyler Boyd's that inside receiver, that slot guy. He averaged, 6 receptions, 80 yards per game. He also had 5 touchdowns in those first 8 games as well. So that's tremendous production. Now, is Anthony Miller and Tyler Boyd, are they the same player? No, of course not. We got a different quarterback here. Andy Dalton, I think, is a professional quarterback. I think Mitch Trubisky is certainly learning the position still, and so there's going to be, some growing pains there. So I understand the hesitation with Anthony Miller, but like I said, I think from a volume standpoint, from a growth standpoint, Anthony Miller to me is just about as surefire pick as you can get in PPR. And I know I'm kind of dressing it up a little bit, but Anthony Miller in PPR to me is an auto pick for where he is going in drafts.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. You saw flashes to what he did in 2018. We saw some flashes down the stretch in 2019. Let's not forget, his early season numbers in 2019 were reflective of a shoulder injury that he had. In fact, I think he was playing with it in 18 and still putting up big numbers. So, I absolutely love that pick. I think Anthony Miller, there's so many guys, wide receiver is so interesting this year because I can't subscribe to zero RB at all, given the amount of depth there is at wide receiver, because there's so many guys that are going to be on the cusp of that, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 range. There's going to be a big chunk of maybe 15, 20 guys that are going to be in a group of a spread of maybe 25 points, 30 points maybe. And all these guys have the potential to be solid wide receiver 2s, maybe even touching the end of the wide receiver 1 conversation. Guys like Miller and PPR, Deontay Johnson's another. It's just so many guys. Like, I don't know why you would invest so early in wide receivers and fade running back when there's massive position scarcity at running back, and it just isn't there in wide receiver.
It's true. I've tried a couple of different mocks where I go zero RB, and yeah, it's a little dicey. It gets a little bit dicey. Although I still do believe there is a place for zero RB this year, but it's just more difficult to navigate. Especially at the top of the draft where there are certain players, from a running back position are going to get volume. So and again, fantasy football is so much of a volume game that you're playing with fire. Who knows how it turns out? I know that there's been a lot of, ink, spilled about how zero RB is the way to go, no matter what the class is. But boy, I tell you, you do have to thread that needle a little bit, and you really do have to play it pretty well and really understand fantasy football and really understand, player movement, scheme fit, all of those things to make it work out. And if you do, hey, tip of the cap to you. But I think for the most of us that play this game, even for myself, I find it very difficult to do zero RB. So that's something that I kind of sort of keep in mind, especially when I'm giving advice to folks that I know are not pouring in, 20 hours a week looking at, depth charts and scheme fit and stuff like that. So it's very, very difficult, but certainly I think there will be a place for zero RB, and a lot of folks will employ it. But man, it does get pretty tough.
Yeah, it does. But I think that's the great thing is we all have many different ways in which we want to scale the mountain, and ultimately you don't win your title on draft day. It's all about what you do in season. So yeah, as you say, if you're seasoned and you can navigate the wires and the waters, I think ultimately the winner of titles this year will be the people who react to what's going on. And I think it's so volatile this year. Be the people that can read the tea leaves, can just get ahead of things and just get very, very smart, and also probably be the most active player in their league. I think you need to be active more than any other year, I think, if you want to win. I mean, if this is just a bit of fun, a bit of banter, then obviously you take it as seriously as you choose. But if you want to make hay at the end of the season, you got to be sharp, because one wrong move could tank it. But what about some guys that you are potentially fading over consensus? We've got a couple of minutes left, so just one or two guys that you think are being overdrafted. We've had Aaron Rodgers, but is there anyone else that you feel that our audience should be fading?
Yeah, I mean, one guy that I've kind of circled is Melvin Gordon. He's going somewhere near the end of the third round in 12 teamers, outside the top 35. But he's just somebody that I don't think this is a team that is going to be playing from ahead very often. And I know Vic Fangio, they're going to want to keep that ball on the ground, keep their defense protected. But I just don't think – I look at their defensive roster, and I think it's going to be a little bit of a problem. And it's just a crowded backfield anyways. I really like Phillip Lindsay. I think he's a very good player. I think Melvin Gordon is an okay player, but I don't think he's great by any stretch of the imagination. And, going in that top 35 to me just feels a little rich. And he's a player that I don't care how many mocks I do in that price range. I'll never take Melvin Gordon. I mean, there are other players that I will gladly take ahead of him. And we're talking about Allen Robinson, DJ Moore, Amari Cooper. If you're looking at running back, I love Jonathan Taylor this year. He's in that similar price range as well. So I don't see it. I think Melvin Gordon certainly is a player that I think is being overdrafted. If we're going to wide receivers, I can't believe I'm picking all these Cal guys, but Marvin Jones, to me, man, I just look, he's got a top 100 price tag, and I don't see it. I really do not see it. He saw 91 targets last year. 91. That's sub 100. That's not good. That is firmly in the wide receiver 3 range. He had 779 yards, so sub 800 yards. Also not great as a number 2 receiver in that Detroit offense. And his fantasy value was absolutely, salvaged by the fact that he had 9 touchdowns in 13 games. But you got to remember, 4 of those came in one game against Xavier Rhodes and a completely washed up and downright bad Minnesota Vikings secondary. So I'm not trusting the volume at all. I think, Pencil Bro, aka Matt Patricia, he clearly wants to run the ball. Detroit was 17th in passing attempts last year, by the way. Okay. So I think this year they've got, DeAndre Swift to go along with another fantastic running back as well. So they've got two viable running backs that I think can each take home, 15 to 18 carries each, right? So I'm just looking at I'm searching for the volume. I want that volume. I want Marvin Jones to be a successful player, but Kenny Golladay is the clear-cut number one guy in this offense. I think tight end TJ Hawkinson also will take a step forward. I'm struggling to find where the volume and the consistency will come from. I think week to week he's going to be an extremely volatile player. And if you want him in best ball, by all means, 100%, he's that guy. But in standard redraft, especially in PPR, even in the top 100, I am struggling, like I say, to find value in Marvin Jones.
Do you know what? It's an interesting point because the Lions have, is it as many as 16 players on their COVID reserve list now? It's north of 11, 12. I thought, it's updating all the time. Most of their offense, are out with COVID. It's not talking about we're taking one player out of that system. Like, okay, Matt Stafford has COVID. Okay, yeah, that's bad. You get a backup quarterback in. David Blau will come in and he'll throw some reps in practice. These guys aren't going to practice. Galladay's got it. Hawkinson's got it. All of a sudden, you're talking about most of that offense is out for 2-3 weeks. We got 5 and a bit weeks left till the season starts. Like,
right,
those guys aren't going to be ready week 1. So you almost have to factor in every single member of that Lions offense has to be taking a dip down in their first 2 weeks because their first 2 weeks is going to be preseason because none of them are going to to be conditioned and ready. And that's if they're asymptomatic at best and aren't suffering from symptoms and illness. So I've got to the point in drafts now where I don't think I want to take anyone because I think it's going to take so long to get anything going it's going to be a quarter of a season before they start putting up numbers. We saw what Zeke was like with no preseason and no, right? He was terrible for 3 games, and that's at the running back position. So, yeah, I was really high on Jones at the start because, you look at the cases of his numbers, and I know they're not great. 2 of those starts were ones he left due to injury. You think, okay, with Matt Stafford there, you think fine. They take Swift, you think, okay, well, he's still in the 9th round. He's probably worth a bit of a flyer in that range, perhaps. There's better guys there, but if the draft board falls a certain way, you think maybe. But now I just don't think I want anyone in that offense because I just think I don't think anyone outperforms their ADP in that Lions offense now because it's just going to be a diminishing return. I think the Jags is almost the same way with the amount of cases they've got.
Yeah, sure. I mean, look, I'll take DeAndre Swift because his athletic profile is just electric. And again, I think Pencilbro does want to run the ball as much as humanly possible. I do think the volume will be there for Swift. The wide receivers, Kenny Golladay is in the mix. He's such a great player. He's just such a great player. You have to at least consider him. Where he's going, end of the 2nd round, beginning of the 3rd round. He's just so talented, and to me, I think his role as the top dog in that, passing game, to go along with a pretty good quarterback in Matt Stafford. We don't talk about Matt Stafford enough, but
no, I agree.
He's still a good player, and he's still competing at a very high level. So he's somebody that I would consider, but just it's the volatility of Jones that is scaring me off. I think there will be weeks where he outperforms Kenny Golladay. It's just, how do you know when those weeks are coming? And in redraft leagues, that's tough. I mean, he could be a week killer for you if you're trying to sit him and play him, either as a flex or as a wide receiver 2. If he's your wide receiver 3, I'm okay with that. I'm absolutely 100% okay with that. But as a wide receiver 2, it's tough, man. That is tough. That's a tough way to live. You just don't know what you're going to be getting week to week from Jones, just because simply I just don't think the volume is there for him to be a consistent contributor. So we shall see.
Yeah, it's going to be a fascinating season. I think the Lions are almost nailed on for a top 5 pick again. And your boy Pencilbro, I think, might not have a job at the end of the season. So unless Swift carries them to I don't know, something spectacular. I can't see it, especially with the hand they've been dealt to start with. But James, this has just been incredible to have you back on. We'll make sure it's not as long as it has been in between, and we'll get you back on relatively soon. But why don't you tell everyone in Rush Nation where they can find the podcast, your work, wherever you're contributing now, where you are on Twitter, anywhere, promote yourself, and yeah, because you're a great follower. You interact with so many wonderful people, and you just are so good with Twitter followers, and you interact with them a lot and answer a lot of questions. So yeah, tell them where they can find you and get some knowledge.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate you saying that. I do take pride, and I do try to go out of my way to interact with as many folks as possible that reach out to me on Twitter. So if you do want to do that, by all means, at James Koh. My last name is spelled Koh. I mean, I'm going to be in a lot of different spots. DirecTV Fantasy Zone for those folks who are stateside. Amazon Prime. They're going to be, bringing back NFL Next, which should be a lot of fun for me. But I'm really just pushing the podcast right now, and again, I just believe in it very strongly that there is a space for micropods, and we just don't see micro podcasts right now. At least not. There's certainly not one in the fantasy space. So 5 minutes of your time. That's all I'm asking for. Give my show 2 listens. That's 10 minutes of your time total. And I promise you, man, I'm gonna give you information. It's gonna be entertaining, and we're gonna have fun. And I would love for people to give my show a try, just to see if it fits with what they do. 5 minutes of your time. It comes out 3 times a week, so it's 15 minutes a week.
Yes,
which
do
is
1 week.
Less. Yeah, in 1 week, which is less than like half of your of any other fantasy show out there. So, and again, I'm going to keep it moving, man. So it'll be fun, and I really want people to give it a try. It's the Fantasy 5, but yeah, if you find me on Twitter or on Instagram at James Koh, I'll be more than happy to interact and answer fantasy questions and those type of things.
Absolutely, go give the Fantasy 5 a listen. Give it 1 week, 3 shows. Give it a try. I guarantee you'll continue to keep it in your podcast rotation, because no matter what everyone says, everybody has 5 minutes, especially for someone as great as James. But James, thanks very much for coming on and sharing some knowledge and skilling up or leveling up our listeners. We really appreciate it.
I appreciate you guys having me on anytime.
Great. And everybody who's been watching the stream, or if you're listening to this on the podcast and it comes out late Tuesday, maybe early Wednesday, depending on where Stocks is at, we do have the live stream on Twitter. You can also go back and watch the stream on Twitter, so find it in our handle. You'll be able to watch the show before most people and get that knowledge and get those waiver claims sorted. That's the quickest way to watch the show. It'll also be on YouTube and many other places. So check out the video version. You get to see James and his Emmys in the background, because I'm dazzled by them. And many other great things. But until next week, Rush Nation, where we'll bring you another guest, keep rushing.